Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Joe Siple. He's the author of the USA Today best-selling book, The Five Wishes of Mr. Murray McBride, as well as four other novels. Joe has spent time as a television sports reporter, a stay-at-home dad, and now as a novelist. So this is the brief introduction that I have here that I'm reading from Joe, but one of the questions that I love asking from the get go when I interview anyone is who they are in their own words. So I'll ask you, how would you describe yourself in this very moment, Joe?
That's a good question. I think the important part of what you just asked there is in this very moment. I feel
Yeah.
like one of the great things about being human is that we can always change and grow and become something new. Uh, I personally believe that they're kind of two selves, right? And one is what I think of as the soul or of
Yeah.
consciousness or awareness, whatever it might be, that deeper part of us that really is kind of the same throughout our lives. It's who we are. But then as we make our way through our lives, we have different experiences and we learn different things and we kind of become something or attach an identity to
Mm,
those things as we
mm,
go through. And so, as you mentioned, I've had a few of those through the years. And when I was young, it was really more of an athlete. I was kind of the stereotypical jock when I was growing up, and then after college, my first job was working in TV. And so, if you had asked me who I was at that point, I would have said I'm a TV guy, and then I became a stay-at-home dad, and then I was very much a father, and started writing, and I was a
mm,
writer. I think that at this point, those would be the two things that I would most closely identify with is father and writer. And those are the things that make me feel like they describe who I am. Another way, though, I think is just to say that I'm just a guy, and I don't mean that in a trivial way or a trite way. I think the best way to understand what I'm trying to get at there is a lot of people probably know the story of Socrates and how what was it, the oracle or whatever at the
mm,
time said that he was the wisest man in the land, and he thought, no, I couldn't be the wisest man in the land, and so he went out to find the wisest man and talked to brilliant people and accomplished people and famous people, came back home and realized maybe I am the wisest man because I'm the only one who knows that I know nothing. And so I feel like that really describes a lot of how I feel a lot of times, where I see people who are so brilliant and so accomplished, and I realize that, not only am I not at that level in many things, but that I never will be. And so it really does give a sense of humility in being like, I'm just kind of a guy, but right now I'm a guy who identifies with being a father and a writer.
Yes, beautifully said. I love the meaning behind your work. So I talked to you briefly off record, and that's so, let's say, it's almost feels like contemplation type of thing for me. I contemplate these things. It's almost like seeing a flower, blossoming to just become what it's supposed to become, and and I think that that's one of the misconceptions most of us have. It's trying to be what we are not meant to become when it comes to that realm of becoming, of changing, in a sense of finding purpose. I know this is one of the topic of our conversations, finding purpose, finding meaning. So how do you see this, let's say, this movement between finding meaning, purpose for ourselves, and at the same time being grateful, being grounded in the present moment, which doesn't really require anything.
Yeah, I think surprisingly they go hand in hand. I think that if we are grateful and present in the moment, then we find who we
Mm,
are. I've had a meditation practice for the last 10 years or so, and my biggest thing that I come back to when I'm meditating is the phrase I like to use is live from your soul.
mm,
And what I mean by that is to understand that there are thoughts and there are emotions and there are physical sensations, and none of those things are actually us. We are actually our soul, which I believe is really based in love. And that's, if you just live from your soul, then you'll be okay. And a
mm,
lot of
yeah.
people hear that and think, well, that sounds kind of weird, a little out there. But I think Michael Singer has a book called The Untethered Soul that I think explains it really well. And he says, think of a white horse, And you can then think of a white horse. And he says, now think of a blue house, and you do that. And it's like, the white horse is now gone. That was a thought. Are you gone? Well, no, of course, you're still here. So you can't, by definition, be that thought.
Mm.
We are not our thoughts. Same things are true with our emotions and with our physical sensations, or the things that we explore with our senses. We're the ones experiencing these things, right? We're the ones witnessing these things. But our soul, or whatever term you want to use, is what is actually us. And that's the thing that I think, like I said, it kind of stays the same, but that guides us through life. And that's what helps us find our meaning and our purpose, is if we are living from our soul and following, where that leads us, where it guides us.
Wow, I love that. What's not to love about it?
Thank
Yes, that's a beautiful. I mean, that's a spiritual message. How did you realize that? At what point? It was a felt realization, understanding, or at this point, it's still this idea, this imagined kind of realm when you speak of the soul. I
Yeah,
would
good
love to
question.
know that.
It's a little bit of both, because I certainly don't claim to know anything
Mm,
about the big things. You can have intuition, you can have feelings, you can have experiences. But as Andrew Huberman likes to say, I don't know if you ever listened to him talk, but anytime there's something that's more in the mystical realm, he says, "Well, I wasn't consulted at the design phase,"
yeah.
and I love that, because it just goes to say, like, I can have intuitions and I can have feelings and I can have experiences, but I don't actually know for sure, what the answers are. But I think that I came to where I am right now in my kind of beliefs about things such as they are, through my meditation practice. And the thing that I really liked about that is the encouragement to experience for yourself. It wasn't being told this is true, now believe it.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
go into a place where it's calm and it's quiet, and you can really be with your soul, and then see what happens, and just experience that for yourself, and see where it leads you. And I think that's been a really valuable way for me to, not only have a little bit of understanding around the big picture things like that, but the other thing I love about my meditation practice is that and there's kind of two realms. And one realm is simply the living a better life realm. If I sit and I let my thoughts go for a while, and I just allow myself to feel the emotions, then I'm a better person for it. I'm more patient. I
Mm,
have more perspective. Uh, all of these things that make me a better husband, a better father, a better friend. Um, and that's a really important part of meditation. Now, if you put a little more time in, then you start to realize, just kind of naturally, you have experiences that are a little deeper. And those are much more difficult to articulate. And I don't know that I can necessarily
mm.
do a very good job of that. But that's where you start to realize the connection, that we have with um, everything, and how, what that consciousness is, and the possibility that's out there that I don't claim to understand, but I'm intrigued by.
Yes, I'm a student of Vedanta. It's a Hindu spiritual philosophy of non-duality. The way you speak, it's very similar to the language that they use, in that I have understood so deeply. But you're right, it's something that we cannot claim to know, because it is knowledge. It is a knowledge that we have, but it's not something that can be knowable in a sense of description. We can't describe the soul. We cannot describe what consciousness really is. But we know it's real. It's actually more real than anything else.
Mhm.
Yes. Gosh, did you have a teacher to teach you meditation, or you taught yourself to meditate?
Yeah, completely self-taught, which I know is not the right way to go about it. I
Yeah.
have listened to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of books and things like that, and they all say, go to retreats, get a teacher, and that's how you really get to kind of the next level with things. Um, and I don't know if it's fear or just doesn't fit with my personality, but I feel like, maybe that'll be in the future. Right now, I feel like I have a good thing going, and I get a lot out of it, and so I'm just kind of riding this wave right now. But
Mm,
potentially down the road, who knows what might happen.
yeah. So self-taught, right?
Yep.
That's the term. And that goes for writing too. We talked briefly off record, and you mentioned that it's something that you just started doing, and it worked. But not in a sense of worked in a sense of selling, because you became a bestseller. But it's you were able to express really well feelings and emotions and the depth of human connection and in the sense of living with purpose. So talk to me about that. I know you talked to me off record about it, and I apologize for asking you the same question, but
Okay.
if you could go back to that process of becoming a writer. And I just found it to be very inspiring.
Well, thank
It's
you. Yeah, I
beautiful.
think it's different from most writers out there because I think most people who end up being interested in writing were kind of always interested in books, at least.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I mentioned I was kind of the kid that just played all the sports, and I read a few books, but really wasn't that into it. Um, and it wasn't until my wife was in medical school. She was my girlfriend at the time, but she was in medical school, and so she was studying all the time. And for whatever reason, it surprised me that I felt drawn to the
Yeah.
computer with the story idea. And I had plenty of time because she was always studying, and so I wrote this story over the course of a few months, and I just had a blast, and I was hooked. And I learned very quickly that I actually wasn't a very good writer at the time. This was back in 2001 when I started this. But even then, there was some sort of kernel of, I hesitate to use the word talent, but there was some
Yeah.
way where I was able to write things that gave the readers an emotional experience. And that's always been my goal of writing fiction. I
Right.
have nothing against people that, write thrillers and people that read thrillers or, espionage movies or courtroom dramas or romance, whatever the case may be. It's all great. And
Mm,
I don't have the talent to write a lot of that stuff. Um, but I knew early on that what I wanted to write was something that would give the reader a powerful emotional experience because that's what I feel is worthwhile. Distractions are fine. There's nothing wrong with wanting to just escape and getting lost in a book or a story. But if you can read a story and relate to it and connect to
mm,
it and find a deeper meaning for something in your life, that's where the gold is, in my opinion. And so it did take 17 years from that first night when I was in my wife's apartment and started writing a story until I had my first book published. Because I was kind of starting from scratch. Like I said, I didn't
yeah.
have a lot of
Yeah.
basis there. I had to improve my writing, but I knew the whole way the kind of story that I wanted to write and the impact I wanted to have on
Mm,
the reader. So when I finally was published and the book started to take off and do well, um, I'd go on Amazon and read reviews and just see how are people taking this? What do people think? And there, I can't even articulate what it would make me feel like to read something where someone say, as a 90-year-old woman who had given up on the rest of my life, and now I'm motivated to go out there and make the most of the time I have left. And
yeah.
people who had lost children and who had given up on life because there's some themes in the book relating to that, and finally felt motivated to kind of re-enter life. And those things are beyond all expectations of what might have possibly happened with putting a story out in the world. But it always was the core of why I wrote. And
Mm,
I think that became even more so and more solidified when I was halfway through writing The Five Wishes of Mr. Murray McBride, and my dad passed away unexpectedly. And he and I were very close, and the story changed significantly after that. And really, since then is when I became the writer that I am today for the messages that I write about and the
mm,
emotional impact that my stories can have on some people. Um, that's where that comes from. And there was really it's not like I sat down and thought, now I'm going to write like this, but I was feeling so many powerful things that just came out on the page when I was writing.
right. How do you see this idea of inspiration? Does it come from intuition? Do you believe that's coming from, let's say, the spiritual realm, the soul realm, or even those who have passed? I have heard a lot of that too, that have influenced their work and the way they perceive life and the way they live
Hmm.
because of the loved ones who have passed. So, did you feel? I would love to know more about your connection with your father. That's one thing, but also if you felt that connection, that there's something there, there's a message, because it sounds to me like this is something that you're always meant to do. So you feel like you're very open to life as being life itself. So you're always listening, which that would open that space for the possibility of creating something like you have. So, talk to me for a moment about that. If you have those belief systems, if it is a belief system, and your relationship with your father.
Yeah, well, I'll start with my dad. He
Yeah.
was amazing, and he was one of those people that I wish I could sit here and read the obituary that my sister and brothers and I wrote after he passed away to really give you a feel for who he was. But he was just a fun, good-natured person who really put people first, and life to him was
Mm,
all about people and relationships. And not in he wouldn't teach me in so many words about that, but I would see it in the life that he lived. And yeah, he was an amazing person, and losing him was uh, a huge blow. Um, yeah, and that's something I could certainly talk a lot more about. But as far as how it relates to inspiration, um, I don't necessarily have a firm opinion on where it comes from, and whether
right.
my dad is able to somehow kind of transmit inspiration to me. I love that idea. I don't know if I believe that. I love Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of what, Eat, Pray, Love. Is that the name
Yeah.
of
Oh,
the
yes.
book?
All women, we all know. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
great book.
Yeah.
She says that she refers to it as being visited by genius. Not that somebody is a genius, and I'm certainly not making that claim, but
Yeah.
with the idea of inspiration and being able to create something that somebody isn't a genius, but they're visited by genius, and you just have to be open to the possibility of genius visiting you at this time. I like that idea because I do feel like it isn't something that I've been able to force very well, and I guess it's kind of on a relative scale. There are things that you need to do if you're going to be open to the inspiration or the genius to
Right.
come visit you. You have to kind of get your butt in the chair and start writing and see what happens. If you don't do that first step, then nothing's going to happen. So some of that is under your control, but I've found that so many times when I've forced a story out, it just doesn't have that extra layer of again, in my terms and my goals, the emotional power for the reader. It's just missing something.
Mm,
And when it is something that I feel like I'm open to the inspiration, and whatever that force is visiting me at the time, then things come out much different. And that's when I get the experiences of writing something and going back the next day and reading it and being baffled because I don't remember writing that, and feeling like that's
right.
actually really good. And I don't remember writing that. How did that get there? Those are amazing experiences.
Right.
And I wish I understood more about where they come from so I could maybe harness it more. But where I am right now is just kind of being open to it, and putting in the work that I can put in, and hoping that it whatever it is that needs to come visit me comes to visit.
Mm, yeah, you have done that. Yeah, you
Oh, thank
definitely have done that. It comes across that way for some reason. Just by talking to you today, not for too long, I get this feeling of you being sensitive and open to possibilities, to the invisible realm per se, to come and visit.
you.
So it feels that way here.
There's so much that we don't know. And I feel like even now I'm 46 years old, and I'll have experiences that I didn't even know were possible.
Mm,
And um, I guess one kind of trivial example that just came to mind is, the Wim Hof method is a big thing right now in some circles. And it's a three-pronged approach of meditation and deliberate cold exposure, and some breath work. And the breath work is basically intentional hyperventilating and then holding your breath. And it is kind of amazing. I can hold my breath for 45 seconds maybe before, and if you do this practice, I could do 3 minutes, and it
wow.
amazed me. But there's also in this process this release of, it must dopamine, endorphins, I don't know what it is, but it feels like you're a drug high or something. And I remember after I did that being like, I don't understand how this could be something that exists as a possibility for humans. And here I'm just discovering it at 46 years old. And it's
Right.
the breath. How simple can
Right.
you get? And it's just kind of a trivial example of how there's always things out there that we don't understand or we don't know. And we have five senses. And, who's to say that there are things that, you see animals and birds that can sense things in nature that we can't, birds that are born and fly to the same place every year, even though they've never been there. But all of the other the species go there. I'm just amazed by the possibility of things out there. And I'm not,
Yeah.
a lot of people think that my not knowing would be something that would be frustrating or detriment in some way. I see it as the exact opposite. I see it as so exciting that there's so much possibility, and maybe I'll discover more of it while I'm here, and maybe I won't. Maybe there's more to discover afterwards. Maybe I don't know, but I just find the openness of possibility to be really exciting and not scary, not a bad thing at all. I find it to be really a positive.
Yes. I love the saying that somebody said that I took it. I said, "This is mine now." Um, I I don't have a life. I am life. So that kind of resonated so much when I heard that like, okay, this is it. Yeah, that's true. I am life. I'm not something separate from life. So in that sense, we do know. We know I know I'm life. But at the same time, because I can be anything and life is everything, then there's this sense of freedom in a way. It's
Mhm.
really a sense of freedom. Look, this is it, and how amazing, how incredible.
The freedom is really a wonderful way of seeing all of life, because I think that everybody, no matter how they grew up, I was very fortunate to have a great childhood and great family and great parents. Um, but everybody has certain things that they kind of learn along the way.
Yeah,
And um, no matter how good or positive those things might be, they're by definition restricting, because it's difficult to just be open to everything when you're a child, and you
yeah,
need some kind of some restrictions, so you can make your way through life and figure out how to actually you know make our way through life. Because like I said, I feel like there's a connection with the soul, as I think of it,
mm,
and things like that. But there's also the fact that we do have to live our lives and wake up in the morning and brush our teeth and get some breakfast, and there are things that you have to do in order to make it through life, and those are just naturally restraining and constraining. And I think that part of
huh,
growing older and growing in wisdom and maturity is to, at the very least, recognize those constraints, realize that most of them are somewhat arbitrary, necessary when they were developed, but arbitrary, and decide how we want to live the rest of our lives. Um, I find that to be a really interesting idea. And there's a book that I really enjoy called Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life.
ah,
The author's name is escaping me right now, but it's really kind of about that, and how there's a moment when you realize that actually you have this freedom to take our life where we want it to go. And I do feel like it's important to include the caveat that that is something that we're lucky to have, and that not everybody has it. And that's one thing that I do struggle with when I'm thinking in bigger picture and um, more spiritual realm, is the old argument of why does God allow
yeah,
evil? and and I think, well, yes, I have this freedom to do my life however I want it to be, and to go in different directions. And a lot of us have that relative freedom. But what about the child that was just blown up by a bomb in Gaza, or the child that's starving to death in wherever the latest famine is? It's
yeah.
those people don't have the freedom. They don't. And so how does that relate back to my beliefs on this? And that's where I really fall back to where I just don't know. All I know is my experience, and try to do the best with that I can.
Mm. I think most of us don't accept that as truth, that God consciousness is something that can be anything, and it is everything.
Hmm.
Or it's not that God is in everything, but everything is in God. Only God exists. So that really, I'm a student of Vedanta, as I said. So this is my closest to, let's say, my truth per se. It kind of matches what resonates energetically with me. Like
Hmm.
this is something that really resonates. That's why I'm a student of that philosophy.
Sure, sure. Well, I was just related back to my writing when I'm writing these stories, and there's something that's deeper in them. I think it's why I like to have so many of my stories be about life and death, and
Yeah.
and things like those themes. Is it's like I'm exploring all these things that you're talking about while I'm writing. And at the end, there may not be an answer for me that I can, get to the end and say, now I know this. This is what I've discovered. But what I've found for my experience, and everybody's is different, but in my experience, it's the asking of the questions and it's the investigation that
Right.
has a lot of meaning. And
Yes.
the fact that I personally haven't landed on answers that are even really satisfactory, although I explain that that's more exciting than scary for me, it's still unsatisfactory to not land on these answers that I'm searching for. It's the search that I think a lot of people are responding to when I write these stories. And I'll for people who haven't read The Five Wishes of Mr. Murray and McBride, there are almost these aside scenes or chapters where the little boy is playing a video game and he asks the old man to play with him, but it really has nothing to do with the video games. It has to do with him wanting to ask the old man these really personal and deep questions about death. You know, what it's like to die, what it means, does it hurt, where do you go? All these things are
Mm.
the big questions that I think as we go through our lives, we've been trained kind of not to ask, or we get those answers from some organized place that tells us what the answer is, and we're supposed to accept it. And so, in either one of those cases, there's not a lot of actual investigation and
Mm.
actual thinking about it. And
Mm.
it's like we've been taught not to think about it. Well, when my dad died and it was right in my face, and then that's what I was thinking about, that's what came out on the page. And I think that that's what a lot of people have been connecting with, is having the permission, the freedom to be able to ask these questions and talk about these things that
Mm.
can be scary if you suppress them, and actually feel much better if you are open about it. And my books are one way for people to kind of have an avenue to start that conversation, I think. And if I've done my job well, they start it with some emotion behind it, because that's really
Mm.
what I'm trying to do when I'm writing these stories.
Yeah. There's a review that caught my attention on your website. Elizabeth, her name. She wrote, amazing to finish a book feeling as though I'm a better person myself for having known these people through its pages, even though they're fictional. So that says it all, right? Even though they're fictional, it's still a valid message. You still resonate with it. It's
Yeah.
I mean, I love the part of human connection though. I know the boy, the man, the old man, the young boy, and then there's another girl there. So
Mhm.
their relationships, human connection to me, there's so much to learn about connecting, like you said, asking questions, not being afraid to investigate, to explore, go deeper. Why not? That's just beautiful what you're doing. And I'm so glad that became big. People are reading it, people are resonating with it.
Well,
You
thank
see,
you.
that's so important. I mean, that's what we are, seems like we are waiting for, in a way. See, that's the soul to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think I do a lot of book clubs, both kind of locally and then
Yeah.
on Zoom when people are having a book club, and it's kind of fun to join the book clubs. And it's funny because I've learned
Mhm.
that apparently my target demographic is mostly 75-year-old
It
women,
said
but
that.
whatever,
Yeah.
whatever works.
Yeah.
Um, but always at these book clubs, one of the discussions that we have is the relationship between the old and the young, of course. And I've always kind of thought of myself, I guess the cliched term is an old soul, but I've always
Yes.
felt that in me. And recently, I just started a little podcast myself called Living Well with Joe Siple, and it just talks to old people. I don't I don't know what term people of a certain age, most of them I've talked to so far have been fine with me calling them old people, but when
Yeah.
people are a little more
Yeah.
advanced in age, have a few more experiences, and talking with them about sharing the wisdom that they have, because there's so much that I think that we miss out on as a culture and as a society when we ignore that. And so, um, in my books, and specifically the Murray McBride books, um, which I've just finished the first draft of, the first wish of Mr. Murray McBride is going to come out just before Christmas, so I'm excited about
Oh,
that.
wonderful.
But in these
Yeah.
books, I look at that dynamic, that relationship between the old and the young, and it can be fun, it can be funny. I've got some email interchanges between the two in the book that are meant to be, some a little bit of humor there, and then also it can be really an example of how far apart we can be
Yeah.
when it's the old and the young, and how much we lose if we don't work to bridge that gap. And so I think that's one of the more important things that people have taken from these Murray McBride stories, is that we really aren't all that different, even though a kid growing up today has completely different life experiences than somebody who was born 100 years ago.
Right.
I mean, the whole idea of computers and smartphones and social media. I talk to my daughters a lot about these things, and they're right when they say that in past generations, kids always felt like their parents didn't understand. But there's a whole nother level to that that is real now with all the technology. And so it's just dividing us among age in a way that it never used to before. And I think
True.
that for those of us who um, are missing out on the wisdom of an older generation, that's something that we can correct. And I'm hoping that my books and my podcast will at least start people thinking about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I have read the reviews. Gosh, it's just beautiful to see people relating to the messages.
It blows my mind every time I look. I can't, and it doesn't feel real to me, because I think it's because I did have 17 years of failure and rejection, right? I mean, my
Yeah.
first 17 years of writing fiction, I didn't have anything but form rejection letters, and it was really hard to go through. And that's a very common thing for people who write fiction. It's not like I was the only one. That's how it usually is. But because I had that for so long, I don't think it matters how many reviews like the ones you read are out
Mm.
there. Every time I read them, I get this spark of feeling great that this is the response somebody had, immediately followed by this thing that says that can't be about my book. I must have fooled them somehow, and I let's move on before somebody realizes that I'm a fraud. So,
Because in a way, it's funny because in a way, it's not, right? It's universal. It's it's being life itself. That's the thing I think most of us don't really relate to. It's really a hard thing to really realize that we are a lot more universal than we think we are. We think we are humans. We are this person, but it's universal. It's everything that's happening to me from my perspective is universal intelligence. It's nothing personal.
mhm. Yeah, I think that's something that if we forget, that's where so much of the conflict in the world comes from, is we see
Mm,
people as other, and we don't realize that we all actually kind of want the same things, and maybe we have different ways that we think is the appropriate way to get there, but that comes from our own personal experience. And if I had lived a different experience, then maybe I would think there's a different way to get there.
mm,
But we're all kind of trying to get to that same place where we all love each other and are able to have happy and fulfilling lives.
yes. So there's a message in the book about that caught my attention too, that so many people talked about is the acronym SBK,
Mm,
strong, brave, and kind. So that kind caught my attention, of course, brave too, but
mm.
kindness for some reason that's my guiding principle when it comes to being practical, using what I know spiritually. So it's being kind. So
Mhm.
talk to me for a moment about that, if you can disclose that about in the book, how you came across this message.
Of course, that ended up being one of my favorite things to write. And now when I sign books and things, I'll put SBK
Yeah,
and then sign
yeah,
my name.
it's
Uh,
cute.
I love it, and it's one of those things that we talked about inspiration earlier, and how it comes, and how we're visited by it. I was sitting in
Yeah.
a coffee shop here in Fort Collins where I live one day, and I was writing a chapter, and I just wrote that. And the next day I went back and I'd forgotten that I wrote that. It was really weird, but it really is something that talking about my dad and lessons I learned from him. Like, that's just kind of the kind of person that he was. And he wasn't the strong. He wasn't like a big burly strong guy that was put a lot of his identity into his masculinity. He wasn't like that. But he was emotionally strong, and he was somebody who was very stable, and the brave and the kindness. And when I was writing
Yeah.
that chapter, I just part of it was putting myself into the mind of the characters, which I love about fiction. You're imagining these characters; they become very real, and that just seemed like what these characters would say in that case, and what they might do. And I loved the idea of hello and goodbye are perfectly fine, but if you have a greeting where it has a little extra meaning every time, it's very similar to when somebody leaves and you say, I love you, goodbye, and you're injecting a little bit more. That's really where the idea of the SBK, strong, brave, and kind, came from.
Yeah.
Was how what's another way that somebody could uh, inject more meaning and more love into something that is just a normal way of going through life. And I'm really a proponent of that idea in general. And a lot of people think, small talk or just little superficial interactions really are meaningless and don't mean anything. I couldn't disagree more. I think that if I go and I
Uh,
get a coffee from a barista and we look at each other in the eye and we say thank you and have a good day, you add those up over time and it boosts people up and it just shares, happiness and joy and love, as opposed to, I don't order on the app and go pick it up and not look at anybody for that reason. I'd rather sit in line for a while. I know it's old school. I know it's not convenient, but I want to have that very small interaction, knowing that maybe my looking at her or him and smiling and saying thank you and have a good day could make a difference. You
yeah.
hear stories all the time about somebody who's having a really hard time, and the smallest act of kindness from a stranger can make the biggest difference in the world. All of those are the things that were in my mind when I was writing that chapter about SBK.
Wow. I love the message.
Thank you.
That goes for me in a way too, in a sense of body mind being personal in that sense, just being individualized expression of life.
Mhm.
I often think that way. I don't like small conversations, and I say that I love deep conversations and
Mhm.
deep connections. But there's something very true to what you said, and I think it comes from. It's almost like from somebody who has the knowledge already. It's almost like you already knew these things before coming into this life. So it's easier for you to kind of express those truths without seeking to understand them deeper, like even finding the trivial to be something meaningful, and it could
Mhm.
be. So that's what you're coming across now as almost like a monk, a modern
Well,
monk.
that's about the nicest thing anyone said to me. And I don't think it's mutually exclusive, the superficial and the deep. I love deep
Right.
conversations, and I was one of the reasons I've been so excited to talk with you today is I know that that's something that you do and you do very well. I'm just saying that superficial interactions with people also has some value,
Yeah,
because
and
deep
that's true.
conversation is where the really good stuff is. Doesn't necessarily mean that the superficial interactions don't have value. Maybe not as much. I would probably be open to that argument, but
Yeah.
something, it doesn't mean that they're worthless.
Right, right, right. Yeah. And I love how you kind of dance between those two worlds too,
Mhm.
which that goes back to the idea of wisdom, I guess. So I'm curious to know what your perspective on wisdom and knowledge. What is the difference between, we talked about knowing that's actually a good thing. What do I know really? So that you were referring to knowledge and knowing. So, but and then we talked about wisdom too in your book, the message, they are wise. So what is the difference?
Yeah, it's a very insightful question. And I guess the knowledge is easy for me to explain. And this is just the way I see
Yeah,
those terms. But knowledge is just, facts accumulating. Now you can read a textbook about science and you learn more about science. And so you accumulate facts and now you have knowledge.
right.
You could be the most knowledgeable person in the world and not have any wisdom. And I think the opposite is also true, where there are people who are wise who really they couldn't do very well on the SAT, but they can teach us things about what it's like to
Mm,
live a human life and to exist in the most meaningful way possible, that somebody with all the knowledge in the world could never tell us about, because they don't have that experience and that wisdom. So wisdom is a little bit more difficult for me to try to define,
yeah,
but it's just that deep sense of knowing how to be in the world and how your being in the world makes the world better.
right. So it is a form of knowing, a form of knowledge, wisdom. But it's from what I understood from you, it's something that's it's more expressed than in a sense of with actions and behavior than with words. It's not an intellectual thing. It's not based on facts even, but it's just a way of living that would resonate with humanity in a way. right?
I think that's right, and I think that it has goes back to my meditation practice and why I say live from your soul is the way
Mm,
that I try to, um, that's what I try to take from my meditation practice is how better to live from my soul. That's what I'm trying to tap into is this kind of innate wisdom that I think we all have if we're able to get rid of all the
mm,
extemporaneous things that are blocking the way from our feeling that wisdom and seeing that wisdom. So that's really what that's about is trying to get in touch with that, trying to tap into that wisdom, which, like I said, I think we all have it. I think it's all there. It's just a matter of discovering it.
it really comes to me as a message, as a powerful message that everything is one, it's connected, everything is God per se, consciousness. That keeps coming to me. It's almost as a way of seeing life too. It became a perception in a way. I look at everything as, God
Mhm.
expressing itself as this person or whatever it is. That changed everything, and at the same time, it didn't. It's a paradox in a way because everything remains the same, but by changing your perception, in a way, you change the world. But in a because the world only exists with here, really. I really think that way too, Joe. Once we close our eyes, that's it. Then the world is gone. There's nothing. I mean, if we're not able to experience it, then it doesn't exist. Then
Mhm.
would I don't know. That's a question for you too. What is your idea of death? What's your relationship with death, even?
Yeah. No, that's a good, quite a big question, right?
Yeah,
That's kind of
yeah,
the big one that everybody grapples with if they aren't bogged down in the day to day of, how do I get my next meal and where do
yeah.
I, sleep tonight? And I think it definitely the honest and overarching answer would again be that I don't know, and that I'm okay with that because it's not scary for me. And when I say, part of me wants to say, well, nobody knows because nobody's actually experienced it. Obviously,
Right.
people can have beliefs and feel very confident in that belief and know in their heart that they are right. They
Yeah.
just haven't experienced it yet. So, you could argue that you can't know if you haven't experienced death. And um, so it in my mind, I guess I'm a little more logical than I wish I was sometimes. On one hand, I am very open to possibilities, and I certainly don't judge other people's ideas because I don't know. If I think that is the one danger of belief is that if
Mm,
you're 100% certain that you're right, and that by definition means everybody who disagrees with you is wrong, and that creates this othering as well. And in my experience, if I'm just open to possibility, that feels like the best way to go through the world.
right. I love that.
Oh, thank you.
I'm tempted to ask the question again. So you said, no, I would say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about death. But what does wisdom say if you would ask, the inner innate wisdom in you? What is death? What's my relationship to death? And or how do I perceive death? What do you think he would say?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know that I'm somebody who is qualified to answer that. But in my experience, if you're asking what would that
Yes,
say to me,
intuitively. Yeah.
yeah, intuitively, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
Um, I guess it would say first of all, you're going to find out someday, and it'll be exciting to find out.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, um, this is how you can be the best right
Mm,
now and share the most love and spread the most joy. And that's what wisdom is about in
yeah.
this being, as a human life. And what happens after that isn't for you to know right now, and you'll find out someday. I guess that's what I feel like my soul would tell me when I ask what is death.
Yes. I love that. Though something in me just love exploring, going, it's a playful thing, I guess. And I find it to be playful. Like, what is it? Well, we do have some evidence. It's really overwhelming that, some people who have been through, I think, near death experiences. And, I interview a lot of psychics and mediums. And I mean, it's just amazing. I have a lot of experiences myself. So many of these so-called mystical experiences, spiritual experiences. And I remember one day, the most recent one was kind of I was sleeping, and then I just after meditating, I meditate at nighttime, and then I woke up and I felt like I was outside, and I knew outside of my house, and I knew what was happening. I could see everything. and the cars that passed by, the truck that was parked. And then when I woke up and I asked my husband what had happened, he was outside. He described exactly what I saw. So that's one experience. Just the risk. I have so many myself, and I have, of course, I'm in touch with a lot of people who have even deeper, more powerful experiences. So that shows really that that's what we are. Really, it's unlimited. It's infinite. We are the infinite, kind of having finite experiences.
Yeah, I'm super intrigued by all of that and open, like I said, because
Yeah.
I don't personally feel like I know much about that. But so it enables me to be open. But what I can relate to is in my own meditation practice, like kind of what I talked about earlier, where there's one level that helps you make your way through this world better. And it helps lower your stress, and it helps you control your anger and your negative emotions, and disconnect from the thoughts and emotions and
Right.
physical sensations, and realize that those aren't you. You're just experiencing them. And that separation can allow you to handle life so much better. More deeply than that, there's kind of the next realm, which I have had experiences where I'm just touching the edge of it. And so I can understand what you're saying, because I've had, just along the fringes in some longer
Yes.
meditation sessions where you kind of naturally gravitate toward what you're talking about. And that's where, I just simply don't have the experience to be able to speak, with any level of education on it, because I have only touched the fringes. But that makes it very intriguing to me, and I guess that's kind of where I am right now.
Yeah. So you had a little bit of a glimpse, per se. A lot of people say that, right? A glimpse of that. And I think that's in a sense, it's not because it's not something separate. We are not separate from consciousness. We are that. So, and then it's, to me, it goes back to this again. Like we are the infinite, we are limitless, but at the same time, we are the finite and the limited when it comes to body mind. So because we are everything, there's no separation, there's no gap really. It's so
Mm,
close that this is it. So
mm,
that becomes I am what I'm looking for. This is it here. And that's when you really like wake up. I mean, it's just incredible. This is amazing. How can I be here and at the same time be everywhere else? It's just incredible. And it's not really an identity thing. I know a lot of people say, you need to identify with the God, God's reality. To me, it's the extraordinary and the ordinary coming together. It's the infinite and finite. They're just, they merge, and this is it. That's what we find the
mm.
experience in the human body and then the natural world and so on.
I
It's
think I
just
have a
amazing.
I have a somewhat similar experience when oftentimes after I have, through meditation, kind of put myself in the frame of mind that I think is the best place to be. And then I'll go and, take my dog for a walk around the neighborhood,
Yeah.
and just looking at the beauty of the clouds and the trees. And I'm not thinking about the past or the future. I'm just really experiencing that moment. And somehow I felt like that experience is connected to what you were just talking about.
Yes, right. When there's no gap, we're just here now. There's nothing
Exactly.
else happening. This is the whole world. This is the universe.
Hmm. And what an amazing thing it is that we're here in this moment and able to experience it.
Yes. Thank you so much for being you. It's just beautiful to see how open you are and what you have done. That's clear that you're coming from that place.
Oh, thank you.
Because I know that consciousness, God, whatever we call it, it's that big I. It's it's not personal. So it's just supporting life in every way. It's amazing how supportive it is.
Mm.
And it's not really what we call love. It's just it's nature. It's and it's not trying to make us a better person, or it's just free to be whatever it is. So it does in the most amazing way. It's almost like watching a movie. And speaking of movie, I actually wanted to ask you, do you plan to transform your books into a playwright, I think you call it, movie
Yeah, it's a
script?
screenplay.
Yeah, screenplay.
I personally, I think the ultimate of this whole writing endeavor would be able to see the story that I created presented in a movie
Yeah.
form, I think that would be amazing.
Yeah.
That's extremely difficult to have happen. Apparently, it's very rare, and we did recently kind of have a very first small step where we sold the screenplay rights to somebody who is, does that as a profession, and so he's going to turn it into a screenplay and then try to
Yeah.
sell that to production companies to make it into a movie. But as I understand it, it's a long process and a very small chance that it might happen. But it's pretty cool to see in the Amazon reviews just how many people say this should be made into a movie. So I'm
Yes.
hoping that maybe it'll get some. Uh, we'll start being able to maybe make that happen, even though I don't have anything to do with that personally. Just have to let the people that do that do their thing and hope for the best.
Yes, yeah. If it is meant to be, it will be. And it
Exactly.
really feels that way. When I read the story, that's what it came to me as a I just visualized that. That would be a beautiful movie.
Well, thank you. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yes, if you have like I don't know if that's possible. Do they have? I know the review is one way of assessing the audience and how many people would watch the movie. But if there was a poll or something, it would be amazing to just let me know. I would sign up for it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know what all the ways they might be able to make that happen are, but I will definitely let you know if I learn of something.
That would be fun. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much again, Joe, for being here, for being open to life, for being you, and for the messages that you're putting out there. It's truly beautiful. Thank you. And for our connection today, for our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
So I want to mention the website before we go, joesiplebooks.com. And I'll have that website there. Are you on social media as well, Joe?
Almost none at all. I have a
Oh,
personal Facebook page, and that's about it. And I never really even do anything on there. So it's a conscious decision that I've made that for me personally, I
yeah.
feel like I'm better off if I don't spend too much time on that.
Yeah, just have your website and focus on your writing. Great. And
Yeah,
your family.
exactly.
You have
Yep,
enough.
exactly.
Thank you so much again for your presence, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.
Awesome. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.